Hey everybody, I would love to take this moment to show you everything I've been working on over the last year to upgrade all of the door families. This is probably one of the more major updates I have made to any of our family lines, and so I wanted to take a moment to thank everyone for sending all their comments and for giving me their support. These are packed full of everyone's requests that I've taken in over the last probably 3 years. And so it's a result of everyone's input, and I am really excited to share with you all of the things we've changed. So to get started, the biggest change is we've just added a ton of families. So you are used to seeing all of our product lines typically come in a couple styles. We've always had craftsman, modern, and traditional doors, and now we're introducing another style called commercial doors. And they're just what you would expect. If you're in commercial architecture, these are going to be very familiar to you. So that's the first item. Then in addition to that, every one of the styles has a lot more doors in it. So let's just take Craftsman for example. Each one of the styles has the same doors, with the exception of Commercial has one extra door that the other ones don't, and I can go through that in just a minute. So let's just look at our standard doors. So we now have flavors. So one of the bigger things we used to do is interior doors were separate from exterior doors. And that was originally to try to lighten the interior doors because the exterior doors needed more parameters, like exterior and interior were more important. But I found after listening to all of you guys, the ability to change different sides of the door, even interior wise, is important. So we have combined interior doors with exterior doors. So now they come in one package. So we're no longer selling them separately. If you just buy our door package, it has both interior and exterior. So the door package is divided now into 4 flavors. So there's the style, and then inside the style, there are standard doors, exterior doors, transom and light doors, so with side lights and transoms, and then there's curtain wall doors. So let's just look at what's new. You've always had the swinging doors, both single and double, but now we've added arched single and double doors, which are apparently pretty hard to find on the internet. And in at least where I'm from, in residential architecture, these new arched doors are making a comeback, so I've needed these a lot on my own projects. We have also added a double acting door that's double acting, and then a communicating door and a Dutch door. So let me show you how those look in floor plan. This is the double acting and the double acting, the communicating door, like in a hotel room where there's a door on either side, and then the Dutch door. We've always had sliding bypass and pocket doors and double pockets, so those are not new. A pivot door is new for us. So you now have the opportunity to make pivot doors. You can change where it pivots and all the other parameters that you would come to expect. We've always had bifold and double bifold. We've always had barn and double barn. We adjusted this just a little bit. We used to just have cased openings, but I've also just thrown in openings without casing, simply so that I think these come default in Revit. You probably have these already, but these will have the same parameter naming conventions as all my other doors, and they'll function the same. So just for consistency's sake, I have included those here. All right, a lot of new doors on the exterior. We now have auto sliding and auto double sliding. So if you're, I don't know, doing a storefront and you just need an auto slider, those are in there. This is one of the most demanded doors, is a multi-folding. So there's a single, and then there's a double multi-folding. And then we also have multi-sliding, both double and single versions. And then we have always had a sliding exterior door. And then your 2 overhead options, overhead pan, just like a square, and one with an arch. And then rolling overhead is new for us. We had never built this before, but we've included that now. Okay, that's the exterior category. Then when you go to transoms and lights, I've just done about every option that I could think of for everyone. So there's single door with a transom, there's a cased opening with a transom. You can just look through there. I'm not going to go through one by one. There's just anything you can think of, it's probably here. A lot of this is for the commercial, but a lot of this can also be used as front doors. And you can change out the lights and the transoms with different panels and styles. So there's all of those. I don't even know how many of those I've done. I added a lot of doors here, over 30 new door families in each style. And then curtain walls. We've never actually done curtain walls before, but we've got a couple of flavors. We've got 4 sets that are just all glass doors, so that are meant to go in curtain wall. You've got your pivoting curtain wall doors, and then you have your swinging curtain wall doors. So this is kind of more for commercial. This is a pretty standard setup, is your pivot doors. But in residential showers, often you do a swinging door with this hardware on it. So this is more for showers, is the biggest use case scenario I can think of. And then we have just your typical door, but it's meant for curtain wall systems. All right, so those are all the new families. Now let's maybe talk about some other stuff, some features and just other logistics. The new line is all done in Revit 2020. So you have to have at least Revit 2020 or newer, and these will work with all those. If you're older than 2020, I'm sorry, these aren't going to work. I usually like to support all the way back to 2017, but now that's getting so old. Even Autodesk doesn't support 2017 anymore. So we've updated our families to 2020. All right, so let's look at the biggest request I received, other than some of the multi-sliding doors or multi-folding, was to be able to control the swing in 3D. I didn't think it was that big of a deal because I have never used this in my practice, but a lot of you are doing 3D walkthroughs and you like the doors to open, so that is now an option. If you click on any door, there is both a floor plan swing angle and a 3D swing angle. So you can set that to anything you want and it will swing open for you. And you can do that with just about every door, even the sliding doors, like the multi-folding. Those are the most complicated to build, but even those you can type in your angle and those will fold out for you. All right, so there was the 3D swing. We can now, another very popular request you guys were asking for were ADA clearances. So let me just show you here. On any door, you can click on it and you can now tell it to show ADA clearances. So if you click that button, it'll show the clearances in red. And you can pick the type of approach for either side of the door. So if I click on this, you can see right here, let me just pull this out a little more. ADA side, so the clearance on side 1 or the clearance on side 2, you can pick. So I'm showing a pull side front approach and a push side front approach with closer and latch. But you have this drop down and you can pick which kind of clearance you want on which side. So that is now integrated. By default, they will be turned off, but you can simply turn them back on very easily. The other thing that is helpful now, this wasn't a request, this is just something I put in. When you hover over a door or select the door, you'll notice there are some invisible marks that show up in blue. When I am not selecting the door, it disappears, but when I hover over it or click to select it, you'll now see some Roman numerals. And in fact, I'm going to show this on the double door because it's even more helpful here. You're going to see some Roman numerals and some letters. This helps you identify which side of the door is which so that you can pick the correct parameters. So for example, when you're trying to change the door material, you know which side is side 1 and which side is side 2. This way you can more easily know what parameter you're changing. So that's the Roman numeral 1 and the Roman numeral 2 corresponds with side 1 and side 2. Then on double doors, we mark the leafs. So there's the X leaf and the Y leaf. So for example, this right here, this is the X leaf on side 1 and this is the X leaf on side 2. So you'll more easily be able to understand what's going on. This also works in 3D when I hover in 3D over the door or select it. So if you're trying to change the parameters in 3D, you'll also be able to see which is side 1 and which is side 2 and which leaf is which leaf. Another thing we did is you'll notice this little bar right here. That is to help you more consistently align your doors from perpendicular walls. Because for me, it's often a problem where I'm trying to draw my wall. Let me get something that's not a curtain wall here. And if I just want to put a door here, it's sometimes annoying. You want these to be consistently set dimension from this wall, and you usually have to try to get temporary dimensions or dimensions and then enter those in. Now we just have this invisible line. You can align to it. So if I use the align command, I can click on this wall edge and I can click that line and it will align it. And this is that distance from the edge of the door to that is a parameter. So if you go, it's a type parameter. All right, so if we just come down under graphics, there is a side guide offset. So right now it's set to 4.5 inches, but maybe you like yours a whole half a foot away from the door. You can change that to 6 inches, click OK, and that will update that line. So now we can align the door and you can know that it's always 6 inches away from the surrounding wall. That's particularly important in commercial, but I also, in my residential, I also use that one quite often. Okay, another thing that happens in commercial and residential is sometimes we build our walls so that they're two separate walls. Instead of doing like a compound wall, we maybe draw two walls like this. In commercial, when I do it the most, it's because I have maybe a CMU wall, and just in some of the restrooms, we have tile. So I do a very thin tile around the bathroom. And instead of trying to make a special type of CMU wall with tile as a finish, I just make a second wall. And then in residential, what I'm always doing this is in the basement, I have maybe a concrete wall, and then I have a smaller furring wall right next to it. And only some parts of the basement have furring, or there's different size furrings. So I don't try to make a compound concrete wall with furring. I just draw it as two separate walls. And if you've ever used a door, most of the time what happens is you have to pick one of the two walls to host the door. Now let me shut this off here. Let's see, sorry, shut off those ADA clearances. And then you see how it's hosted to the door, and then you can join the geometry and it will cut the second wall. It'll cut the opening in the second wall, which is great. But do you see how now my trim and my jamb is not in the correct spot? There was no way to fix this in most families. The default Revit families and most families that are made online don't have a fix for this. So we now have what are called frame extensions. So if you come into here, under the dimensions, you're going to look for frame extension, and you can extend side 1 or side 2 or both. And all we need to know is how thick your second wall is. So right in this example, oops, it's an 8-inch. So we need an 8-inch extension, and I can see from hovering that it's on side 1. So we're going to go to frame extension side 1. We can put 8 inches, and now the frame engulfs that whole width. And even if these walls are separated and they're not joined, you can still extend it. There might be other use case scenarios, but those are the two that I most often run into, are the kind of finish layers and furring layers. Okay, another thing we did is, let's go to an elevation view here. And you'll notice we've always had, let me shut this door all the way. We've always had these marks that show the swing. That's pretty standard. But we had some customers who are in Australia or some other countries. Your swing symbol in elevation is exactly opposite than the US standard. So you can click on a door and you can change it from US standard to Australian standard. So if I click the edit type, we have the option under graphics to hit Australian motion symbol. Click that, click OK, and that will flip the door symbol for you so that it fits the other standards. And while we're talking about graphics, let's go to a floor plan. We now have a smart tag that we have improved. So when you go to tag a door, let's just do the tag option. You'll now see there is an improved tag. So this was to help both our commercial customers and our residential, or both. What happens is, by default, depending on which tag you've placed, you'll show the actual dimensions of the door in typical residential format. So 3.0 meaning 3 foot 0 inches wide by 6 foot 8 tall. And so it'll do that regular format that we're used to seeing classically in residential. And you can also display the door mark number up above it. You can also switch to just show one or the other. We could do dimensions only, or you can do the number only. And you can pick between the instance mark or the type mark. And so now you have a lot more options with the same tag, so you can do whatever style of noting that you're used to. All right, we have also updated all of the doors so that they now have room calculation points. So now when you schedule these, you can have a from room and a to room in your schedule, and the doors can now be associated with room objects. All right, this is starting to get to be rather lengthy. We've put in a ton more features. There's at least 15 other features that I haven't gotten to yet. These are the big ones. If you'd like to see some of the more small ones, you can play around with the parameters. We've added a ton of parameters, especially when it has to do with frames. You can now pick between hollow metal frames or wood frames. You can pick the frame width on both the jambs and the head, especially for commercial. I know when we do masonry, it's important to be able to control those frame widths so that we can make the opening a masonry dimension. So you can control the head height separate from the side heights. You can control the jamb's location within the wall. You can just about everything. Double rabbet, single rabbet profile is all both in there. And we've also updated all of the trim work around the frame. So now it corresponds better with our package that we just released called the Finished Carpentry Package. All of these frames have been updated to go along with those styles. There's a lot more options of frames. There's also this, many of these with like these bigger headers, you can turn those off. So I call them fancy head trim. You can turn that on and off. So for example, we'll go ahead and turn off the fancy head trim and it'll just do more of a standard casing. And then you can also turn these plinths on and off. So you don't have to have the plinths if you don't want to. If you want a more simple frame, that's possible. We've updated some hardware and added it, especially for commercial. We wanted some panic hardware in there. So we've added that. Let's go over to the commercial. Another thing we added to the commercial was a double egress door. So if you're familiar with commercial, you may or may not have used this, but it's basically a fire door that allows you to egress 2 ways. And it looks like this in plan. It's got kind of a complicated frame. And like I said, dozens and dozens of others. You can now control the material on either side of the door separately. So if a door is white on one side, it can be black on the other. For all of you who are using this for interior design, I know it's very important for you to be able to paint one side of the door. You can change basically everything, almost everything about the door. You can change one side from the other. The trim doesn't have to be the same on both sides. The hardware doesn't have to be the same on both sides. It's all now changeable. All right, I think that is the biggest updates that we've done. Again, get the update and see it for yourself. They're much better than they were. And I, again, appreciate all of everyone's input and happy designing, guys.